The small town of Millbrook had always been quiet, a place where everyone knew each other and life moved at a gentle pace. But today, that calm was shattered by a scene so sudden and startling, it seemed like something out of a nightmare. In the middle of the flooded waterway, a wooden footbridge had given way. The old planks, weakened by relentless storms and years of neglect, had finally crumbled under the weight of recent heavy rains. The remains of the bridge jutted out at odd angles, half submerged in the murky water, their jagged edges threatening anyone who dared come close. On the edge of this chaos, a man in an orange jacket and blue jeans was mid-leap. His face was tight with concentration, eyes wide with fear, and his mouth slightly open as if shouting, but no sound came out. His blonde hair was slicked back by sweat and the breeze, and his light skin was illuminated by the bright daylight. Arms stretched out in a desperate attempt to balance himself, he seemed to hover momentarily in the air, caught between safety and disaster. Below him, the water was calm, deceptively so, reflecting the warm light of the sun and the damaged bridge above. But beneath that peaceful surface, danger lurked. A sudden shift in the man's position made it clear he was fighting not just gravity, but something more urgent. Around the scene, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They stood at a safe distance, eyes fixed on him with a mixture of shock, fear, and hope. Among them, a middle-aged man in a dark suit and a cowboy hat stood with arms crossed, his face unreadable. He was quiet, watching intently as if calculating what would happen next. The man in the orange jacket was trying to reach the other side of the waterway, where the remnants of the bridge had collapsed into a mess of splintered wood and broken planks. Just moments ago, he had been walking across the walkway, perhaps rushing to help someone or maybe trying to get somewhere important, when the structure suddenly gave way. Now, suspended above the water, he was risking everything with a single beep. Would he make it? Or was this his final moment? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. As he stretched further, the crowd held their breath. The man's face was full of determination and fear, a reflection of everyone watching. No one knew what was truly at stake, but one thing was certain. This leap was more than just a jump. It was a fight for survival, a test of courage, and perhaps the beginning of a story that would change the town forever. The man in midair seemed to hang there for an eternity, caught between hope and despair. His outstretched arms trembled as he reached for a sturdy-looking piece of wood jutting from the wreckage. It was his only chance. If he missed, the cold water below would swallow him whole. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat echoing, like a drum of impending doom. Below, the water rippled gently, almost mockingly calm despite the chaos above. The reflection of the broken bridge and the bright sunlight shimmered on the surface, hiding the dangers lurking beneath. Hidden debris, submerged logs, and the sharp edges of splintered wood that could easily pierce through flesh and bone. The man's eyes darted desperately, searching for any sign of salvation, any sign that his leap would land him safely on the other side. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mixture of gasps and shouts. Some shouted instructions, others simply prayed silently. The middle-aged man in the cowboy hat, who had been silent until now, finally uncrossed his arms and took a step forward, his brow furrowed in concern. He looked at the man's outstretched hand and then at the precarious gap ahead. His mind raced. Could he help? Could anyone help now? Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across the water, causing ripples to dance and making the man's body sway, dangerously. His grip on the wood tightened as he fought against the gusts, his fingers desperately clutching the rough surface. His face twisted with effort and fear. Every muscle in his body strained, and for a moment, it seemed as if he might fall short, his fingertips just brushing the edge of the wood. But then something unexpected happened. A loud crack echoed through the air as a section of the remaining bridge, weakened by the storm and the years of decay, finally snapped. The sound was deafening, and it sent a shockwave through the crowd. The man's eyes widened in surprise, and he instinctively lunged forward, grabbing hold of the wooden plank with both hands. For a second it seemed like he might slip again, but he clung tightly, his knuckles turning white. His body swung dangerously close to the water, but he held on. The crowd gasped collectively, some shouting in alarm, others in hope. The man's face showed everything: fear, determination, and a flicker of relief. He had made it, just barely. He pulled himself up onto the fragment of the bridge which was barely holding together and scrambled onto a piece of floating debris. The water lapped at his legs as he struggled to find footing. Behind him, the remnants of the bridge continued to crack and sway, threatening to collapse entirely. The storm's fury had only just begun to settle, but the damage was done. He looked back across the water, now safe on the debris, and saw the crowd still watching with bated breath. His chest heaved with exhaustion, and his eyes flicked to the group of onlookers, some of whom were now rushing closer, trying to figure out how to help him. The man in the suit and cowboy hat exchanged a quick glance with others, their faces tense and serious. The man in the orange jacket took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. His mind raced. What now? Could he cross the remaining gap? Was it safe to try again? Or was he stranded here on this scrap of wood, in a town that was suddenly a battleground of nature's fury? He knew one thing for certain. His leap had bought him a moment, a chance to survive. But the real challenge was just beginning. The core. Man on the debris stared out across the water, chest heaving, heart pounding like a drum. His fingers still clung tightly to the ragged wood beneath him, trembling from the adrenaline rush and the cold splash of water that soaked his jeans. Every second felt stretched and heavy, as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. He knew staying still wasn't an option. He had to move, had to find a way off this fragile refuge before it was too late. The crowd surrounding the scene was silent now, holding their breath as they watched him. Some clutched their hands together, others whispered hurried prayers. The cowboy-hatted man stepped closer, his face grim, eyes scanning the water to judge the man's next move. His gaze flicked to the remaining parts of the broken bridge, where the wood was creaking ominously, threatening to give way entirely. Suddenly, the man on the debris shifted. His eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that could help him get to safety. His mind raced, trying to weigh his options. The debris was only a few feet from the bank, but the distance and the unstable water made it seem like an impossible leap. Still, he had no choice. He couldn't stay here forever. He took a deep, shuddering breath, then pushed himself to stand. The water splashed around his ankles as he moved cautiously, balancing on the slippery debris. His muscles screamed in protest, but he forced himself forward. Every step was a gamble. One misstep could send him tumbling back into the water, or worse, onto the jagged remains of the bridge. Just as he was about to make the jump, a sudden surge of water caught him off guard. A large piece of wood, loosened by the storm, floated past him with a loud splash. His eyes widened in alarm. He reached out instinctively, trying to grab it, but it slipped through his fingers. The debris was gone, swept away by the current. Panic gripped him for a moment, his mind flashing with worst-case scenarios. What if he couldn't reach the bank? What if the water pulled him under? The crowd gasped again, some shouting words of encouragement, others frantic. The man in the water looked desperately around, trying to gauge his remaining options. His gaze settled on a sturdy-looking tree, branch that had been knocked loose during the storm and now floated nearby. It was just within reach, bobbing on the surface like a lifeline. He lunged forward, stretching as far as he could. His fingers brushed the rough bark and he grasped tightly, pulling himself closer to the branch. His muscles burned with effort, but he refused to give up. With a final heave, he managed to latch onto it and hoist himself up, hanging above the water by sheer willpower. The branch was thin and it bent dangerously under his weight, but it was enough. Gritting his teeth, he scrambled along the slippery wood, inching toward the riverbank. His legs kicked out, seeking a foothold, and he finally managed to plant his feet on the muddy shore just as the branch snapped behind him, sinking into the water. He collapsed onto the bank, coughing and shivering, looking back at the treacherous water behind him. His clothes clung to his body, soaked and heavy. Around him, the crowd erupted into a mixture of cheers, sighs of relief, and hurried calls to each other. The man's chest heaved as he fought to catch his breath, knowing he had just escaped a disaster that could have claimed him. But even in this moment of victory, a cold chill ran down his spine. He looked toward the remaining wreckage, still swaying, still threatening to collapse further, and wondered what had caused this catastrophe. Was it just the storm? Or was someone or something behind it all, pushing nature beyond its limits? He looked up at the bright, clear sky, trying to steady his trembling hands. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that this was only the beginning. The storm had passed, yes, but the real storm was still coming. And he had just become a part of something much bigger than himself. The man on the muddy bank took a long, ragged breath, his chest rising and falling in ragged synchronization with his pounding heart. His clothes clung heavy with water, every movement reminding him of how close he had come to being swallowed by the treacherous waters or crushed beneath the fallen remnants of the bridge. As he pushed himself up onto his knees, he looked around, trying to process what had just transpired and what lay ahead. The crowd had begun to close in, their faces a mixture of relief, awe, and concern. Some hurried to offer blankets and dry clothes, while others kept their eyes fixed on the wreckage, wary of further danger. The cowboy-hatted man reached out a steadying hand, helping him to his feet. The man nodded gratefully, voice hoarse but grateful. He glanced back at the water, still swirling with turbulent energy, and then at the remains of the broken bridge. The storm's fury had subsided, but the damage was done. The river was more unpredictable than ever, and the landscape around them seemed forever changed. Trees knocked down, debris scattered, and the fragile stability of the land itself compromised. Questions flooded his mind. Who had caused this? Was it just nature's wrath or something more sinister? Why had the storm suddenly intensified? These thoughts churned within him, but he knew dwelling on them wouldn't help now. His immediate concern was survival and understanding what to do next. As he tried to steady his nerves, a sharp cry pierced the air. Turning sharply, he saw a young girl clutching her mother's hand, her eyes wide with fear. She pointed toward the river, where a large section of the bank had begun to crack and crumble, exposing jagged rocks and loose soil. The ground was unstable, and more parts might give way at any moment. The realization hit him hard. They couldn't stay here. The floodwaters could surge again, or the earth beneath them could collapse. He instinctively stepped forward, voice firm but gentle. We need to move away from the river. Fast. The crowd responded quickly, some helping the elderly and children, others gathering belongings hurriedly. The boy in the torn jacket looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Without hesitation, the man nodded, leading the way toward higher ground, away from the danger zone. Their hurried steps kicked up mud and gravel as they moved, hearts pounding with urgency. As they climbed a nearby hill, the aftermath of the storm became even more apparent. Trees were uprooted, fences fallen, and the landscape had transformed into a chaotic tapestry of destruction. The skies were clearing, but the threat of further landslides and flash floods lingered in the air. The man paused briefly, glancing back at the ruined riverbank, feeling a strange mix of relief and foreboding. Up on the hill, the group gathered, catching their breath and assessing the scene. The woman with the child looked at him with gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my daughter's life." He shook his head modestly. "We all did what we could, but we need to stay alert. The storm might be over, but the danger isn't." Suddenly, from the distance, a faint rumble echoed, a low, persistent sound that didn't belong to the storm. It was deeper, more ominous. The ground beneath them trembled subtly, and the wind carried an unsettling scent, something sulfurous and strange. The man's instincts told him this was no ordinary aftershock of the storm. It was something else, something that hinted at even greater upheaval. His gaze fixed on the horizon where dark clouds still lingered, swirling ominously. Whatever was coming next, he knew it was beyond just weather. It was something larger, something that would test everyone's resolve, and perhaps reveal truths long buried beneath the calm surface of their quiet town. He looked down at his soaked clothes and battered hands, realizing that this storm had only begun to reveal its true nature. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer just a survivor of a flood. Now, he was a witness to something far more profound, something that would change their lives forever.